lead is watching the event so far. Hoda, an interesting statement from the army. What have you made of it?
Well, I think the army is actually beginning to formulate its position very timidly. But, this is the first time we hear anyone say that the state of emergency or the emergency law will be lifted. So far, what we heard from both the Vice President Omar Suleiman and even the Foreign Minister is that the emergency law will be lifted when the security situation allows. It was a much more open-ended statement from the political side than what we heard from the army. I mean, so for the past 3 weeks, the army has been saying that it will not attack the Egyptian people, will not stand against the Egyptian people. It came here on the square and said to the protesters that all their demands will be listened to and will be followed, applied, if you want.
Well,
so I think we're beginning to see a positioning of the army, but a very timid one.
I heard only an English translation, obviously. The Arabic original may have contained nuances that the translation missed. But what he said was the emergency law would come to an end once current circumstances have come to an end. Now, again, it's the first time the army has suggested that this will happen, and perhaps they're trying to bring it to the forefront of the agenda. But does that to you sound like a commitment to actually enact an end to the law?
I don't think it's a full commitment, but it's certainly an indication that the army now is stepping in and is slowly formulating its decision. It's still not a clear decision. It's still not a clear position. A lot of people have been speculating because of the statements and the events that happened on Thursday afternoon and evening that there might be some sort of breach between the army and the presidency and the government. I'm not sure if that is true or not, but I think it will be interpreted as a beginning of positioning of the army. At the end of the day, since all this started, every person you speak to, whether inside Liberation Square or outside, will tell you in the end it's the army that will take the final decision. Now the army is talking about democracy, so it's something that will appeal to the protesters here. It will give them certainly the impression that the army is still remaining neutral or maybe slightly shifting on their side. But I think there's going to be more statements coming out from the army, and that will certainly shape and make us understand better their position.
Let me quote one other sentence that stood out in my mind. It was almost the last sentence of that whole statement, and almost a throwaway sentence. They talked about restoring a normal way of life and returning to work. Again, this was in translation, and again, this may have been a fairly fluid and quick interpretation of what was being said in Arabic, but to me that sort of sounds like the army requesting that people begin to move out of the square. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, it does sound like that, and you have to remember that a few days ago, actually one of the top commanders of the army walked across the square and did ask people to leave. Obviously, that call wasn't heeded. Certainly, a call to go back to normalcy and to stop protesting is something probably people here would expect the army to do, again, to try to show that it's remaining neutral between the government and the people. It's a call that happened many times. It wasn't listened to, and there is the realization that the army does say that, but then doesn't do anything to enact that. So I'm not sure it will be taken too seriously here on Liberation Square.
So practically speaking, just quickly, what we really have here is no change to the status quo. I mean, they didn't mention anything about President Mubarak. They didn't mention anything about a leadership and how it's going to be structured and organized from now on. And they didn't say that anything is going to happen that will change how Mubarak has characterized the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. They didn't talk. I mean, they did talk about, if I understood well the translations through through the earpiece here, they did talk about the transfer of power of President Mubarak to Vice